Hello, everybody. Hello. It is me, Jamila, the IP coach. It's been a minute. I missed you guys. So I'm coming on tonight just to go over something that I've seen a lot, just in my field, and it's the how people use the terms accommodation and modifications interchangeably, and they're not the same thing. So I have to come on and just share that with you guys. So I have to educate my family so you don't make this same mistake that I see these other people making, because they're not the same thing. Accommodations and modifications are two completely different things. Okay, so let me break it down for you. So an accommodation removes the learning barrier for a student so that way they can access their education. So it just changes how they learn. Okay, and accommodation removes the learning barrier from the student so they can access their education and basically work around their disability. So it's just changing how they learn. So, for example, a teacher is giving a test to the class. An accommodation she gives the student is she may allow that student to take the test in a separate location. That's an accommodation. What they are learning does not change. They have the same materials as everybody else in their classroom, same tests. That does not change. How they're taking the test is changing because they're not taking it in a classroom where they can be distracted. They're taking the test in another location that doesn't have a lot of students so that they're not distracted, but they're taking the exact same test as everybody else. Okay, so an accommodation removes the learning barrier for students so they can access their education. How they are learning is just different. So I just gave the example of taking a test in another setting. Another accommodation would be if they're in math class and the teacher gives a student manipulatives or visuals to solve their math problems. They have the exact same math problems as everyone else in their class. How they are doing their math problems, how they're learning is just different. They're using manipulatives and visuals. The materials, not the materials, the assignment, the work, that does not change. Okay. So accommodation removes the learning barrier from the student so that way they can access their education, access their learning, and basically work around their disability. So it just changes how they learn. Modification changes what a student learns and what they are expected to do. Modification changes everything. So the student will not have the same work, the same materials. Modification changes everything. It changes what that student learns and what they are expected to produce. So what they are expected to turn into their teacher. So an example of a modification is a teacher could be giving a test and she gives the student a completely different test than everybody else. Being knowledgeable of what that student is capable of doing, she may give a completely different test. It's not the same as everybody else. Another example of a modification is giving student a different set of homework that's different from everyone else. That's a modification. Another example of a modification is not reducing. If the teacher is using a text in class, it may be a grade level text and the student is not on grade level yet, they may use a completely different text at a lower level, at a lower reading level, so that the student can grasp the skill that's being taught, but they have a completely different text than everyone else in their classroom. So modifications changes what a student learns and what they are expected to do. Okay, they are completely different. It is not the same as an accommodation. An accommodation, you're basically just changing how that student goes about doing their work. So, for another example of an accommodation, if I sit a student near the sharpener, near the trash can, near all the materials they're going to need to complete an assignment. I'm helping that student stay in their area instead of, like, the student could have ADHD and have needs and constantly need to get up. So an accommodation I may do for this student is, okay, I'm going to sit everything that you need near you. I'm going to sit you near everything that you need so you don't need to get up to do anything. They're still doing the same assignment as everybody else in the classroom. I'm just giving them access to everything that they need. That's an accommodation I'm doing for them. An accommodation, let's say they're in gym class. A teacher, the gym teacher may just say, okay, I'm gonna have you run, you're gonna run laps, but you may not run as many laps as everyone else. You're still running laps like everybody else. I just changed the number of laps you're doing. That's an accommodation. Accommodations and modifications are not the same thing. So I am going to put a question in the chat. I'm going to post my question. I'm going to ask you, is this a accommodation or is this a modification? I want to see if you've been paying attention. I am going to put that in the chat here. Does anybody have questions about accommodations and modifications? Put it in the chat if you have a question. Ooh, I must explain this really, really good. No questions. No questions. But yes, accommodations changes how the student goes about doing their work, how they learning. Modification changes what the student learns and what they are expected to do. Okay? So you know the difference now between accommodation and modification. They are not the same. So you should not be using those terms interchangeably anymore because they are not the same thing. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment in the chat. Feel free to send me a message, or you can email me at Jamilah, JAMILAH, at the IAPCoachLLC.com. I am looking forward to seeing you all again. See you.